For today's review, we are looking at the Jakks-Pacific Knuckles figure from the Sonic 3 movie, and before I talk about the accessories and the figure, let's take a quick look at the packaging that he comes in. And of course, it is the same packaging style that we have seen before. I don't know what to call this, but I did remove the plastic container so I can keep this card back. And for this front side, you do have your cast of characters from this movie. And on the back side, you have an image of the figure in an action pose with his accessories equipped to him. And of course, there is this read-up top. It reads, "Knuckles is one tough echidna with no time for small talk. He will protect the Master Emerald no matter the cost." Pretty cool. And of course, this figure does have 22 points of articulation, and on the bottom you do have the collect them all, which shows all the other figures in this wave, such as Super Shadow and Super Sonic, which I have made reviews for in the past. As for the figures I am still missing, it is Sonic and Shadow in their regular forms. So yeah, that is the packaging. And now let's talk about the accessories that are included with this figure, which is actually surprising because the other two figures did not come with any accessories. And in this case, these are effect part accessories, which I think is pretty cool. So these were already equipped to the figure by default in the packaging, so these were already in his hands. And at first, when I took this figure out, I thought that his hands were glued to these things, like they would not come off. But then slowly I nudged them because I was like, wait a minute, they can come off. So they are removable, but they're just like really tightly fitted in once you put this accessory into his fist, because the plastic material that they use for the sculpting of this effect part, it's like this rubbery thick plastic material. I don't know what it's made out of, but it's really tightly fitted when you put it into his hands so they don't fall off, which is good because if you are doing like certain poses where he's punching somebody, you don't want this to fall off his hands. That would suck, right? So yeah, I guess that's a good thing, but at the same time, it is a pain in the ass to take off. So there is that problem, but nevertheless, pretty cool to have these. And the overall sculpt is very nice. You do have this contrast of orange-red colors with a little bit of the orangey parts on the edges right here. And of course, this top part where the pointy parts are, those are for his knuckle spikes to go into. So yeah, and his name is Knuckles, right? So pretty cool to have these two accessories included, and I will show what they look like on the figure later in the video. And now, let's talk about the aesthetics of this figure. Just like what I said for Super Shadow and Super Sonic, I think Jakks did a pretty good job overall with the sculpting of this Knuckles figure, because when you have to take those CGI models and turn them into action figures for this $15 price point, you're not going to expect this figure to look exactly like his model when it comes to the texturing of all his fur, right? Because if you were to make it look accurate, this would be a very expensive figure. So all these details that they did with the other two figures that I have reviewed, I think they did a pretty good job here as well. So I really like all the texture work. And as you can see, even all these hair parts on him, it's very different from the other two because most of the time these are like sticking upward, but for Knuckles, it's hanging down, which this will hinder the articulation for the head sculpt. But, you know, in terms of like the sculpting, like that idea where it's like sometimes you have to sacrifice the articulation for the sculpt, you know, this is what it is, right? They have to make it look just like what he looks like in the movie. So pretty cool. And then for the eyes here, I do like those eyes, the way that they did them, because, you know, it's not just like a flat printing of his eyes. They also added this sort of a plastic layer over it to give us some sort of dimension. Really love when they do stuff like this. The other Sonic figures from their other Sonic line based on the video games are where the eyes are just like a flat design. It doesn't have this sort of dimension, so those are the differences there. And in terms of his gloves, right, they got the spikes, which is cool because, you know, his name is Knuckles. He's going to give people punches, right, with these freaking spiky parts. Also, I don't know if it's just my figure. This is just a QC problem that I just noticed. As you can see, there's like a little bit of these like yellowing things here. And I think this is like some sort of paint smearing, not actual like yellowing from the sunlight. I don't know if this was like this when they were making this figure. There's just like a QC problem at the factory, or it's like some sort of like bleeding of the paint from this effect part. I'm not too sure, but you know, this is something else that can happen when it comes to paint quality problems, especially when you have this equipped to the figure by default in the packaging. So I don't know what caused this, but it can be cleaned, but I'm not going to clean it because it actually gives him more of a look like he's been fighting a lot of enemies and his gloves are getting dirty. So pretty cool. And those are his gloves. And of course they do have articulation right there with the hands, right? There's fingers, which are inside the glove. And for his legs, they are the standard legs that we've seen before. For his shoes, they're pretty good shoes. Again, these shoes stand out more than the ones that Sonic has. Like him and Shadow, they have like really cool looking shoes. Look at this. Like I like Shadow shoes because they got like the cool design. But even Knuckles here has very nice looking shoes as well. So pretty cool. And on the bottom, there is some details with that. So yeah, the aesthetics for this guy is pretty good. And of course, for his torso, he does have a little bit of a different fur color here. Now, in the movie, it is a white patch of fur. But as you can see, it's not as white on the figure because what they did is that this body, I think, is like a red painted body. I don't know if it was. They just painted the white over the red, which that is why it looks this way. So if you don't like the look of this, if you have this figure, you can easily just paint it, you know, a little bit more white to give it more of a dimension so it doesn't look like it's faded with the red. So that's something you can do. And one last thing to point out is that his tail is thicker and longer than the ones that we see on Shadow and Sonic. So he has a different tail of some kind. And there is all the aesthetics for Knuckles. Very simple, but also pretty cool looking for a $15 action figure. And now let's talk about the articulation of this guy. So as I said, with the head sculpt, you are not getting much movement here because of the fact that all these sculpted parts are going to hinder articulation. So even rotating his head is not effective. He can't look up. He can't even look down. So sadly, articulation for the head sculpt is bad. Now, in terms of his arms, he can lift them outward, but for some reason, my copy, because it is a new copy, he does not want to lift his arms upward. So I do need to heat those up, but they should work, right? There is bicep swivel up there, as you can see. There's also like rotation here with this joint. And of course, he has the articulation in the arms as well as articulation with the fingers, right? So there's that. And you do have the swivels in the hands right here. And of course, articulation with the wrist. As for his torso, there is a little bit of a rotation. Actually, a pretty good rotation. Actually, better than the other two figures. So that's cool. So they do rotate. Crunching forward, you're not going to get that. Leaning back, not much at all. So that's not great. Now, for the articulation of his legs, it should be the same as the other figures. He can split out his legs like that. He does have the ability to kick upward, as well as die cut swivel right there. And he also has articulation and swivel in that joint down there as well. For his shoes down here, there is no articulation up top, but there is a little bit articulation down here. As you can see, there's a swivel. There should be a joint that allows him to like lean his feet back, but I think it's just really tight on my copy because it's new. So yeah, that's pretty much all the articulation on this figure. It's decent. Like you can get him into some action poses for sure, but you know, if you have the same problem like my figure where things are just stiff, you might have to just heat it up and just be very careful because, you know, these figures do feel a little bit fragile with their articulation joints for some reason. So yeah, so that's all the articulation for this figure. And now let's show what he looks like with those accessories equipped to him. And one thing I will say, they do add weight to the figure because these things do have a little bit of weight to them. I don't remember like which one goes on which. I think it doesn't really matter. So all you do, you kind of just have to push this in. And I hope I can show this because as you can see, it was really hard to take them out. So getting them back in is actually a little bit easier. So there you go. There's one. And then here's the other one. Let's just put both of these into his hands. They should go right in with no problems. Right? Okay, I think it went in. No, not exactly. Come on. Okay, this one doesn't want to go in, but you get the point. It's supposed to be like something like this with both of his hands. And as you can see, there's like so much weight on the figure now. Like he doesn't even want to lift his arms up because of how heavy these things are. So these effect parts are good in some sense, but they're also like really heavy for the figure. So I'm just going to pop that off. But yeah, that's basically what he looks like with them equipped. So I'm going to keep one on his hand, right? So as you can see, there you go. And now, let's do some comparisons. Let's bring in like just one random figure to compare to, and then I'll bring in the other Sonic figures from this wave. Here he is next to a Transformer Deluxe class. But as you can see, the scale is inaccurate. We all know a Transformers is bigger than Knuckles. So there is this comparison. And for the final comparison, here is Knuckles next to Super Shadow and Super Sonic from the same movie. And as you can see, these are some really good looking figures when you have them next to each other. And I think Jakks did a really good job with all three of these figures. And overall, I think these are pretty cool. And I hope that they make more in the future, especially when Sonic 4 comes around. They will probably make an Amy figure for sure, because if you did watch Sonic 3, well, you know Amy shows up at the end. And also, that metal Sonic robot thing. I forgot the name to it, but it's from the video games. It'll be cool to see that as a figure as well. And also, you know, reissuing a Tails figure, because Tails is very hard to find. I don't even think I can find a Tails anymore because he's sold out like crazy. So, yeah. And that's going to do for today's review. I hope you enjoyed this look at Knuckles. If you found today's review informative, do give this video a like. If you want to subscribe to the channel for more action figure content and whatever else I do on here, it would be much appreciated. And with that said, take care, and I will see you in the next video.